Okay, so if it isn't one thing, it's another. This will be part two of the part one. And I was talking about the people at this little cafe, Nora's, okay? We'll call it Nora's because that's what I called it in the thing. And I gotta. What happened was, I have no idea. It just stopped recording and I saw a little movement there, but I wasn't touching the camera at all. It just stopped. And so when it did that, it shifted. And I saw it. I was like, why is it doing that? Okay, come on. Well, this thing that I put up here, I was trying to just mark it somehow so I could keep my place. I'm going to start over. Not the whole story. Um, so this will be all part two. I don't know. I might have to do part three because this is kind of the longest short story I've ever written. No one had noticed that Taylor and Rock were no longer at the counter. They had taken off near the restrooms, but they had actually gone out back, the back delivery door. The cameras set up, one in the hallway and one in the kitchen, filmed them leaving Nora's. They had left enough cash to pay for their coffees. As Mary passed up Frank at the counter and continued out the door, Frank went back to the table to leave a tip. As Mary went to their car, Taylor came and shoved his gun into her side. He ordered her to give her money and car keys to him. She was stubborn and would not give anything to him without a struggle. Some say this was a mistake because he could not take the fight from her and shot her in the face. She died instantly as Frank was coming out the door and he heard the gun pop. He hurried around the corner but saw no one but Mary on the ground. He bent down to her and called out for help. Rock took her walker and smashed it hard over his head. He got into the car as Taylor was starting up the engine. They were not aware that Max, Nora's manager, had woken up hearing the loud pop. He had seen the crime but backed into the shadows because he feared that if he had been spotted, they would have shot him too. I'll pause here for a minute. That's not really a cowardly thing to do. I think it's a wise thing to do because what had happened had already happened. There was no need for him to be heroic and jump out there and then get his face and head blown off too. Then nobody could be a witness to what happened. He had a cell phone and dialed 911. He told the police that what had happened and tried to console Frank. Frank was in shock. He did not hear anything Max was saying. He wanted Mary. The ambulance came back to him and took him to the hospital, and he struggled because no one was taking Mary. As the attendants lifted Frank into the ambulance, he passed out in pain and shock. He was there. Oh, I was there with him 6 days later as he finally woke up. It was one day away from the now canceled 50th wedding anniversary party. It was the morning of the funeral for Mary. He was not going to be allowed out of the hospital to attend a funeral. The doctors had to give him sedatives to knock him out. I tried to help him when he finally was sent home. He was not talking to anyone. He was not even talking much to me. He would repeat the whole story as far as he knew it. He then asked me to fill in the blanks. It was hard. He finally went in for help. That was a year past the tragedy. The doctor gave him pills to help him sleep, and pills for anxiety, and pills for depression. All of them had bad side effects, and Frank asked to be taken off them. This was 2 years after the murder of Mary. During the 3rd year, he became an alcoholic and abused the pain pills he still kept asking for. He had very bad back pains, but nothing pained him more than the emptiness of no more Mary. His kids all tried to put their lives on hold, but bills piled up. They had babies on the way. Frank did not care. Nothing mattered anymore. It was painful for me to see him this way. Many times I had to visit him, and he would cry or yell. Sometimes he would throw things at me. One time he disappeared for several months. This was in the beginning of the 4th year past Mary's murder. He was found wandering streets, and I barely recognized him. Finally, it was 1 week away from the anniversary of him and Mary, if she had lived. This was the 4th year. He walked into Nora's. Rita Nogales, Blanca's sister, was working there now. She had gotten married to Randy and was expecting their 2nd baby. She seated Frank in the same booth he and Mary had sat at 4 years ago. He asked for this seat, and he had waited for it to be cleared. Rita took his order. He did not need a menu. She then went back talking to Sammy, who was Pamela's cousin. She was now also working her way through college. She was majoring in psychology. She had been telling Rita that the man that walked in had asked for a special booth. He looked very depressed. She was always psychoanalyzing people. Rita nodded and continued to prepare apple pie and carrot cake for Frank. She also brought him 2 cups of coffee, as he ordered. He told her he was expecting someone. Just scrolling up. Someone never came. Frank ate his pie, drank his coffee. He then went to the other side of the table and ate the carrot cake and drank that coffee. At 12:45 a.m., Frank asked for the bill. Rita brought it to him. At 1 a.m., wait a minute. I think I meant to put at 12:45 p.m., Frank asked for the bill, and Rita brought it to him. And at 1, oh no, maybe it was a.m. because their original murders happened at a.m. So yeah, 12 would be a.m. Okay, sorry. At 1 a.m., Frank stood at the counter and paid for his bill. As he replaced the wallet in his tattered jacket pocket, he brought out a gun and shot Rita in the face. He then shot Samantha in the legs as she ran and tried to help. He then went behind the counter and sat down with her. He began to tell her about how Mary had been killed, how the waitresses did not help him or Mary at all. The chef and Max came out from the kitchen and stood still, realizing that Sammy was had been shot but was alive, and that Frank still held the gun to her head. Max returned to the kitchen and called the police. When the police arrived, Frank stood up. Sammy was now out cold from the shock and pain. Frank waved the gun at them. One officer shot him in the hand and he dropped his gun. He bent down to get it and rose again, aiming at the cops. The second cop shot Frank in the head, and he dropped dead on top of poor Samantha. Randy Nogales was putting their first child into a car seat of their Jeep Cherokee. He was going to drive to Nora's to pick up Rita. At this time, I called the police to come to identify Frank. I'm sure Randy's life was about to change. Things like this usually changed people. It sure changed my poor brother Frank's life. Part 2, Train Stop. Chapter 3, Part 2, Train Stop. I don't know if that's all. Did I go in through changes here? Just back up here. I don't remember seeing any other. Okay, so anyways, let's just go into, never mind the part 2s and all that. It's going to get us all confused. I'll fix this some other time. Train stop. As told by Martha Nogales. My brother really broke down after Rita was shot and killed at Nora's the night Frank Johnson had his final breakdown and killed her and his unborn son. Frank Johnson was distraught over his wife being shot and killed the same day 4 years ago at the same 24-hour family restaurant. Everyone around my brother waited weeks after Rita and the baby's funeral to tell him to get over it, get on with his life. You are 25 and still young and can get remarried. How can people be so cruel? Randy loved Rita. He was a great father to their younger child, Lisa. He was looking forward to having a son to take out to the parks and play ball and other boy games with. He felt his life had ended. Part of it had. I knew my friends, and I watched Days of Our Lives. We knew all about love and family and romance and loss from watching this show. Our mother had watched it as we grew up. As we grew up watching it also. We were known as the Days Sisters because at 1 p.m. we would all be found in front of the tube watching Sammy and Lucas build their relationship while Kate, Lucas's mom, would try to tear it down. We called ourselves Sisters because all our names ended in ah. I am Martha, and then there was Sandra and Deidre and Rosita. We had gone all through high school together, and now some college classes. We are obsessed with it and plan the days of our lives around it. So yeah, we were expert on losing a loved one. We would sit around and watch Days, and during commercial breaks, we would think of ways to help Randy. You cannot just turn off feelings like that, Rosita would say. Then she always wiped tears out of her eyes. We all loved Randy. He was the coolest of brothers. We loved Rita also and took care of Lisa while he and Rita worked. We all took turns. We all had Fridays off from college, and and work so we could do girl things together. Lisa was only 4. She had preschool in the morning. We picked her up at 12 p.m. and took her to McDonald's for a kids' meal. Then we had time to get home and watch Days. What can we do about Randy's depression? Deidre would ask. Maybe it just takes time, Sandra would say. Well, of course it takes time, I would say. Yeah. Look at how long it is taking Sammy to get over her brother's death. Days would come back on and we would hush. There was too much going on to miss even a second. Months went by and we could not come up with any ways to make Randy happy again. It seemed hopeless. We sort of just got back to our schedules. Finally, classes had started again, and we had to juggle classes and work. We got really busy this year. Sandra and I worked the mall, and Deidre and Rosita worked at the college. We had to help find a babysitter to help with Lisa. She was starting kindergarten. We had to finally give in to reality and record Days. Our schedules were just too busy for very much of anything. I hardly saw Randy anymore. He even started to leave her during the nights with Tia Rachel, or Blanca as we called her because of her bleached platinum hair. Blanca seemed to be healing okay about the loss of her sister. At least it seemed like it to most people. But because of Days, I knew the symptoms of a drug addict. Blanca had all the symptoms just like John on Days. She was very moody and yelled at everyone for no reason. I started to take all the kids and Lisa too to play in the park, get Happy Meals and take them home worn out so they would sleep when Blanca did not feel well. Randy hung out all night, sometimes at local bars. Blanca got fired from Nora's for fighting with a customer. Randy also lost his job for coming to work hungover and then a few times drunk. I got so busy with schoolwork and the kids, I was about to break myself. I withdrew from 2 classes. I was taking care of Lisa after school one day. We were watching Days. Well, she was coloring in the same room. I was watching the show. It was getting to the part where Billy and Bo was getting very close to finding their birth daughter, Georgia. Then it happened. A soap fan's worst nightmare. A news break interrupting the show. I was so pissed. How could they do this stuff? Lisa looked up from the coloring book. Color with me. So, not really wanting to hear whatever was taking the climactic 5 minutes away from me, I turned down the volume and sat on the floor. Curiosity got to me when I saw a train wreck of some kind on the TV as reporters unfolded the story of something big. It seemed that someone had either stopped accidentally or on purpose on the tracks and caused a crash of not only one train, but 3. A pretty Asian news reporter was telling the story. At the scene, Joanna Tomasuka, it said under her picture as she spoke about the crash. We have a count now of 10 dead and hundreds injured and being taken to various hospitals. The suspect has been taken into custody. It appears that this man was trying to commit suicide. He drove his Jeep Cherokee into the tracks and at the last minute jumped out because he said he could not move the car. It seemed that the wheels were locked in the tracks. His name is being withheld now, as well as all the victims. She then turned and went to a young man just walking around with a stunned look on his face of horror. "He really looks like he wants to talk," I said under my breath. "Sir, can you tell me what happened to you while the crash was happening?" There was blood dripping down his face, blood all over his shirt. "My wife. They took her away. She was pregnant. She was not moving. They took her. I must find my Clara." A name now flashed on his picture. "Victor Perez, survivor of train wreck, lost his 6-month pregnant wife," it announced. "I don't believe this. How could she ask this man a stupid question like that?" I said to myself. I was still pissed that they had taken the show off to report this. Could have waited. My cell phone rang. I answered it. "This is Officer Diaz, Glendale Police. Can I speak to Martha Nogales or any family member of Randy Nogales?" My mouth dropped. As he spoke, it dawned on me. Cheap Cherokee. Randy drove one. Joanne Tomasuka's photo was gone, but her voice was describing the Jeep they found crushed on the tracks. The camera panned over to the Jeep. It was crunched to a million pieces. It did not look like an SUV. It was fatally twisted metal. It was a monster that killed 10 people, and they counted unborn baby Perez too. Oh, had they counted baby Perez too? My mind went as blank as poor Victor Perez's did. "Hello, Miss? Hello, Officer Diaz." He was waiting to speak to a relative of Randy Nogales. He was from the city of Glendale, the same city where the train crash happened. The sand in my hourglass seemed to be running very fast. I could not seem to make any words come out of my mouth. And the sand kept falling, yet things for me seemed to stop. Okay. So that's the end. It ends there. I put an ending note. This is terrible to lose anyone, either through a natural death, murder, or any type of killing. And what makes it worse is when people expect you to get over it. There are some things a person can get over with pills or just talking about it with a shrink. So then I continued to talk about other things, other ways and things like that. So if you or someone you know with PTSD or depression or any other hidden mental illness, please look into an alternative way to clear your reactive mind of these tragedies before you ruin your life or someone you care for. So now, glad I found this, because now I found the other one I was talking about the other day, the biggest geode. But I'm not going to get into that because this is a long story and it's gone into 2-part video. So this will be the end of this part 2 video that will be linked when I can to the other one that I already downloaded. I think It was downloading while we were doing this. Maybe when it finished its downloading, it might have clicked off my video that I was doing before. So I hope that you enjoy this story. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know in the comments. I didn't get to mention it then in the beginning, but I'll mention it on here that this story is, I wouldn't restrict it from kids, but I kind of put a rating on here myself as R, or we could call it MA for mature audiences. You decide how mature a child should be to hear this kind of information. I have my thoughts on this, and they don't match with hardly anybody's, but I'm going to tell you. We need to talk to our children about things like this. Inappropriate manners of speaking to them in ways you don't go into a bunch of details and things like that. But that somebody in their family is suffering from a mental illness like depression. It's something that everybody needs to know about in the immediate family. I've been dealing with my depression for many years. And I went off my medications in 2003. At another time, I'll tell you about how that happened and why and whatever. I did write it down in my journal here. I was thinking of making it into a book that will someday get published. But right now, anytime that I've brought it up, I get ridiculed by one person or another. So I don't really want to go through that right now. But there are different ways to get help. And they don't all have to come through a prescription or a bottle or anything. Alcohol or any of that stuff is just not going to help what's going on. And I think I was also mentioning in a different yesterday's story, 2 p.m. Circle of crazy females or crazy women, whichever. I had mentioned that I had once had a plan to attempt suicide, and I did not go through with it, but I'm not going to go into all of those details either. That's the past and it's done. Here I am. So depression is real, and it's painful. Through a lot of that, I've learned that my mind is very special and very strong, and I need to learn different methods that are not with medication to control my emotions when they are rising up and I can't deal with them. In America, we are still not forced to take medication, and I hope that day never comes, that they force people to take medication or get some kind of treatment, because years ago it was different. Let me see if there's so many things to do when you do get triggered, and I don't really want to go into them because it seems like this is almost about a half an hour long. So I'm not really going to go into all of that. But do you see how this story kind of wove one into the other? Things like that can happen. Did this story happen? No, but there really was an article in the news, a news break that came and was talking about a train, big train crash back during this time, 2003. I believe in the same area that I had mentioned. I kept that part into it. It was just more or less for me to kind of remember that moment when I had heard the news and thought, wow, that's terrible. Why, and why would something like that happen? How? My mind started weaving a story that may not even have happened. But like I said in the other video, that I indeed passed by a restaurant and a 24-hour diner and saw the police tape and things like that, and then got home and then heard this stuff on the TV. So I began to write down this story. It just came to my mind. um, so thank you for tuning in with me. And mostly be kind and gentle. That's my message that I have, is be kind and gentle when you come into contact with somebody who might not be all there. You could be very kind, and something it could trigger a memory for them, and they could get so deeply lost in their depression that there's no coming out of it, and nothing you can do or say can make them better. It's unfortunate, but in my lifetime, I've known it over now. I used to say 23, 24. It's just grown people who have committed suicide. Some of them personally, some were celebrities that I didn't know, but I've known of over 20, 23 suicides that were successful. So, sorry. Anyways. The next one is called, if I do this one, I might do the other one if I find it in here. But this one that I'm seeing here now is called The Biggest Cheat Ode. And there's at least 2 parts to that, and it looks pretty big, pretty long. Not going to read that one now. Thank you so much for being with me. Please give a thumbs up or just leave it. Subscribe if you want to. If you want to hear more of my stories, I feel like I'm on a little roll here with this. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me how many thumbs up I get or thumbs down. I'm just going to keep on doing it because I want someday my family to know what I've written. And if something does happen to me naturally, natural causes or whatever, the writing might get overlooked, but it will be here on YouTube and they can come and look at it. If not, they can still look at it whenever they want to. And then you'll also know a little bit about my writing, because a lot of times an author gets really famous. And I'm not saying that's, if I do, I do. But sometimes they get really famous and then they start doing things like this. I'm doing things like this, sharing some of my stories. And then as I'm writing one in the back of all of this, I'm writing one so that someday you'll already have had this introduction to my writing and say, hey, I heard her reading her own story on YouTube. I'm going to go check out that book. When it gets closer to the time of me publishing that other book, I'm going to share little bits here and there. How about that? But not now. Now I'm going into my short story collection and read some of those to you along the way here as we go into 2021, part 2 of the pandemic for COVID-19. 2020. I didn't really jump on any of this. I was busy outside doing gardening work and stuff like this. And now I'm like, I want to get back into my writing, and I'm hopefully reading this will inspire my mind to start writing in my story that I've been writing since way before COVID started. So, thank you again